Boom, 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 boom. Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1628. Family tree questions. Ooh, what ones are we going to ask today? Who knows? But for those of you who have watched me for a while, you know that genealogy is one of my favorite things to do, and I've made a business out of it as well. And there's times that you have to ask questions of family members. So when you start a family tree, you always start with, who do you know? You know yourself. What information do you know? You want names, birth dates, death dates, marriage dates, place, times, dates and places for those items, for those different people and things. But who do you know? So write first of all yourself with everything that you know about yourself, about any siblings that you have, about your parents, your grandparents. Just write down aunts, uncles, cousins, write down as much information as you know about them without asking them a question. That's the first thing you do when you're starting your family tree. Then it gets into, then you can start putting the tree together with that information that you have, but then it starts asking the questions. The questions. And this is asking not just, just asking family members the questions. And the best way to do this is to sit down with on your phone, on my phone. Hi, TikTok. Let's see. Start off with using the recorder on your phone. You can get the digital recorders that are hands-free and all that. You can put a little video camera up in the corner so you can ask them that way, so that you're capturing their answers, because those are good. Those make good recordings later on. Especially when that person is no longer around. So you always start with the oldest generation that is alive at the time, whether it's a great aunt, great uncle, a great grandparent, great great grandparent. I know some people who have their great great grandparents still alive, which is awesome. And then there's even the rarer cases when you have a third time great grandparent still alive. I mean, that just gives me chills. And when I see those photographs that are out there that have 6 generations in them, I am just like in awe. It just I'm just in total awe of the fact that, some families have 6 generations still around today. I remember seeing a photograph in a paper that had, there was a baby that was like 16 days old. And then there was her mother, then her grandmother, then her great-grandmother, then her great-great-grandmother. And she was being cradled by her great-great, grandma, great-grandma, her third-time great-grandmother, who was 100 and I think she was 104 at the time. So the oldest one was 104, the youngest one was 16 days, and there were 6 generations there of women in this one photograph. And I thought it was such a special thing. But I did go and of course it's sort of like, I wonder how, because I can't remember when the article was done, I wonder how long the third-time great-grandmother was still alive. And she survived, and I think it was another 2 years after that photograph was taken. And I thought, that was so cool. And she was very much, even though she was bedridden, she was aware of what was going on and everything else around her. I thought, the stories these people can tell. So ask them the questions. Ask questions about, what was their birth name? Because sometimes you might know them by a different name, to find out that that's not their name at all. I know several cases where people go by their middle names and have been known by their middle name for their entire life. And then all of a sudden, when you ask the question, what is your full name? You find out they actually have what you think is their first name is actually their middle name. So instead of, you've known them for years as, say, Mary, and you come to find out that Mary's actually their middle name and they have another name in front. One of the most popular ones I come across is when people are called Michael and their first name happens to be John. And I come across that so often when I'm doing research. It's one of the most common, I don't know, what's wrong with John? John's a pretty good name, but then Michael's a good name too. So yes. So anyway, so one of the first questions you ask these people is, what is their full name? How did they get their name? Who were they named after? Whenever I hear somebody gives me their name and it's a name I've never heard before, I would ask them, I go, oh, so I've never heard that name before. I says, where does it come from? Where does it come from? It could be a family name. It could be a name based in the country of their ancestry. It could be a name that, in one case, someone turns around and says, my mother made it up and she was not. why is this such a cool name? I says, what? And she says, well, nobody has it. And I said, isn't that the point? Is that you stick out because you have this unusual name? She goes, yeah, but then everybody knows who I am and because they've never heard it before. And I'm like, but it's so cool that your mother took the time to create a name for you. I said, how did she come up with your name? She goes, believe it or not, from the soap operas. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was some character from us. She had two favorite characters on one of the soap operas, like Days of Our Lives or General Hospital, one of those, that she liked the name of these two characters. And of course, this particular soap opera happened to be her favorite show, that she took her two favorite characters and merged their name into one. And that's what she named her daughter. So her daughter was not impressed that she was actually named after two soap opera stars. So I was like, okay, that's an original way of coming up with a name when you can't decide between two. I said, could she not just give you one of the names and put the other one as a middle name? She says, no, they had equal value of like. I went, okay. So, finding out, what is their full name? Where did their name come from? It could be, like I said, a family name. I know in the Eakins family, when I'm researching in the 1800s back in England, Eakins is almost as common as Smith. And the top five first names for the guys are John, James, Thomas, William, and there's a G one. Hang on. George. Yeah. George, James, John, William, and Thomas are the top 5 names that go with Eakins. And I sat down, it took me 3 years to go through 183 John Eakins that was born in a 5-year period in this area that I was researching to find the one that fitted in my tree. So, yeah, it's always good to find out as much information as you can before you go searching. And then, of course, you ask them, where were they born? When were they born? When I asked my mother-in-law her birthday, I think my mother-in-law. Yeah, my mother-in-law, we celebrated her birthday on one day, but when she got a copy of her birth certificate, we were actually celebrating it a day late. But we just kept celebrating it on the day late one because that's what we knew it as. And she was fine with that. Where were they born? Were they born in a hospital? Were they born at home? Were they born in the car on the side of the freeway? Ask them those sorts of questions. Ask them their parents' names. Was there a doctor or midwife? Was a doctor or midwife present? What are their parents' full names? Their mother, their father, their full names. Where were they born? If they're no longer with us, when did they pass away? When did they get married? When and where? When and where? When and where? Everything you ask them. When you ask about anything that involves dates like births, deaths, marriages, adoptions, because there's those in the families as well, any divorces, there's anything that has a date, when they signed up with the military, when they left the military, when they started working, when they retired from work, everything, when and where. When, date, where, place. And when you are doing the dates, this is so important for my American friends. When you are doing the date in genealogy, it is day, month written out, year, the full 4 digits. It is not 2624. Because 2624 could be interpreted as, by the rest of the world, as the 2nd of June. And then 24, is it 1824, 1724, 1924, 2024? You need 4 digits for the year. You need the day, and you need the month written out. Very important to remember, because it will confuse people if you go in and put, especially if it's below 12, if it's a number that's 12 or below, they won't know whether it's month, day, month. And especially if they don't know if they're looking at somebody else's tree and they don't know who did the tree, and they don't know whether they do month, day, or day, month, it makes it very difficult and can cause some issues further down the track when you're trying to find the information to find out that you're actually that you've been looking day, month, and the person had written it month, day. And then you find out the information later on, and you got to go back and do all this correction and stuff. So remember, for my American friends, when you're doing genealogy, day, month in full, or you can just do the 3 letters. So for January, Jan, Feb, MAR type of thing. But I like to write it out in full, then there is no confusion. 2-digit days, so 01, 02, all of that. Full month written out, and then the full year written out in all 4 numbers. Very, very, very important to remember that. When you're asking the older generation and you ask about their parents, do they know who their grandparents were? And what information did they have on their grandparents? What occupations did their parents have? What were their professions? Did they have more than one? How did they get into that profession? Was it a family business? with one of my was it third great grandfather on my paternal grandfather's maternal side. My third great grandfather, we finally found him, which was very interesting because we had found on the census report that his father was, in one census report, he was listed as a foreign agent. And I was like, when I first saw that, I was like, oh, he's a spy. Yes, he's a spy. Yay, yay, you've got a spy in the family. Only to come out to find out in the next census 10 years later that his wife was the wife of a jeweler. And so the foreign agent portion meant that he was the one that would get on the ships, go from England to the Eastern countries, India, China, all of those sorts of countries, buy the gems and bring them back to England. And so that's what the foreign agent portion meant, was that he would be off doing these trips and come back. We still don't know what happened to him, but I couldn't figure out why my third great grandfather was a bookbinder. And I'm like, that seems really weird that his dad was a jeweler and he ended up being a bookbinder. How did that happen? Well, between the collaboration with a second cousin once removed in Australia, a first cousin once removed in Australia, a second cousin in New Zealand, and myself, between the three of us, we did all of this digging, and all of a sudden we came across this baptismal record for my third great grandfather. He was another, you got to figure out the things for my third great grandfather. And as we always learn in genealogy, when you look at a record, always look what's above, what's below, because you never know what you'll find. Well, when we looked at the baptismal record for my third great grandfather, immediately below, there was this entry. It had a different last name. The child that was, and my third great grandfather was baptized when he was 5. It was actually on his 5th birthday when he was baptized. And there was this child below him that was only about a year old. But when I looked at the mother's name, so I always put the mother's names, they were the same. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And it had but it had 2 different fathers. And on the one for my third great grandfather, it had Elizabeth Morris, which was her name. And then underneath it had the father's name, which was my 4th great grandfather. And it had her address. Then it had his address, to say formerly was. There was a word in there that made me think, hang on, something's happened to the 4th great grandfather, because it's got there like a was or a were or formerly. There was some word like that was there, but it didn't have a current address. And it was in a completely different town. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And then when I looked at the one below where I saw the same Elizabeth Morris, I looked at her address, and she was the same address as what was listed on my third great grandfather's baptismal entry in the parish records. And she had this new husband. She was married to somebody else because she had this. And I'm like, what the heck's going on here? So that started us researching that sure enough, she had gotten married and found her marriage certificate, and her husband was a bookbinder. And when we looked on the census report in 1851 census report, I found the bookbinder in the same street as her. So they were obviously neighbors of some sort at that time. And my third great grandfather was alive. Sorry, my 4th great grandfather was alive at the time of the 1851 census, because that's the one that she put on there, that she was the wife of a jeweler. Don't know where he was at the time. We're still trying to find out more information on him, but something obviously had happened to him or to their relationship that she now ended up with, married to somebody else, and had her son with her. And he became a bookbinder because that's what his stepfather did. So always ask what occupations were, because you'll find that there'll be things going through. When doing studies on looking up about surnames and how some surnames came about, a lot of them, like if you have Williamson is son of William. That's how they got that. They abbreviated it. Instead of calling son of William, it was Williamson. The other ones you can get there is like Baker. That was their occupation. It was either done by their occupation. That, like if you had a blacksmith, you get Smith. That got shortened down to Smith at times. There's Baker, which means they were a baker. You've got those that have SON on the end, which means they were the son of, and who they were the son of. You also had locations, like hill. They lived near a hill. Even the village, some of them would have the village name as well as their last name, that they were that meant that they were from that village. It's very interesting learning about surnames and where they come from. And I actually have a friend who is from Norway, and her last name because I asked her about her last name, and she said, "Oh, that's from Norway, and it's Norwegian." I said, "Oh," and I said, "What does it translate to?" And she goes, "Son of Thor." And I'm like, that is really cool. Yeah, so whenever I hear her name, I always think Son of Thor. Got it. So that was really, so some origins of names are very interesting as to where they came from. Also finding out, found out the occupation of anybody that they know about. Siblings, you're asking them about siblings, you're asking them about their parents, their grandparents, whatever information that they know, just ask them the questions and have the recorder going, and don't make it a long session of recording. So if they start telling a story, let them tell the story. If you want to help jog their memory, pull out a photo album and have them tell you stories about the photos, about some of the photos in the photo album. That was my favorite book as a child, was the photo album. And my paternal grandparents had these the black page photo albums with the little corners and the silver writing on the thing. And I would go over there and I would lift up the corners, because there was one particular album that I liked that had this picture of this car that was on the bottom right-hand corner. So I would lift up the pages till I found the one with the car in it, and then I would take that over and go to my grandfather and ask him to tell me stories about these pictures. And he would start telling us stories. And to be honest, I can't remember any of them, but I just remember that time sitting there while he went through these pictures and told us stories. They were just such special memories. Are there any family heirlooms that have been handed down over the years, and what's the story behind them? How did they become a family heirloom? How many generations have they been passed down? The house that they're living in, is this one that they were raised in? It could be, something as simple as that. How many siblings did they have? What were all their names? Did all of them survive? Were there any siblings that passed away as infants or were stillborn? Just ask different things like, special holiday traditions. Are there any family holiday traditions that they would have based on whatever the holiday was? Was there recipes that have been passed down through generations? Sometimes you have the family secret recipe that nobody's allowed to know about, yet everybody knows it. Yes. Where did they come in the ages of child? Were they the oldest and somewhere in the middle, or the youngest? What was school like? Ask them about school memories when they went to school. What was school like? That's always a good one. I had 9 different schools that I went to. My mother was horrified. She thought that I had horrible parents. She was talking to me one day about how many schools my niece had been to. And my niece at the time was like 10. She goes, "Do you realize she's been to 7 schools?" I said, "Do you realize I went to 9? She's like, "You did not." And I said, "Yes, I did." And I rattled them all off. And she goes, "Oh, what horrible parents you had." So yes, my mother thought my niece was going to all these schools and not realizing that her own daughter had been to 9 different schools. When you there's a good question. Where did your food come from? Was it a grocery store near a nearby farm? Your family's only farm and garden, farm and garden. Did you have your own for the meat? Did you have your own livestock that you would slaughter and prepare for meals and things, or did you have your own vegetable gardens? Did you have a farm nearby that supplied you with fresh eggs? Where did the food come from? That's always a good one. Did you have any pets when you were growing up? What was your favorite one? What was the weather like when you were growing up? You always hear that story about walking up, was it uphill both ways to and from school? And I got my stepsons on that one time. I go, "Well, actually, I did. What do you mean you walked uphill both ways?" And I said, "Well, I lived here. School was here. I had to walk down this hill, up this hill to the school. And then I had to, when I left home to go home, I had to go down this hill and up this hill to get home. So I had to walk uphill both ways. Also had to walk downhill both ways as well." Were you close to your siblings, and who was your favorite playmate? So, especially when you have back in the 1800s and all, there were very large families that were born. And so, was there a favorite, like a playmate that they used to have, that, somebody that was close to their own age that they used to hang out with, that like thick as thieves or something? Or was there a lot of tension between the siblings? What chores did you do? When did you start doing chores? What sort of chores did you do? Did it change as you got older? Did your responsibilities change? Did you go from having to make the beds to having to cook family meals? Ask them to describe if they can remember back this far, depending on their age and stuff. What was a typical day like for them as a child? What was it? They'd get up in the morning. Would they go to school? Have breakfast, go to school. What would a typical day be like for them? How did your family spend the evenings and the weekends? Did you have any favorite toys? What was your favorite hobby? What did you want to be when you grew up? Where did you travel? Did you travel? Now, there's a lot of families that didn't travel at all, and then there were some families that traveled a lot. How were birthdays celebrated in your family? Is there anything? And you may find that in the birthdays, there could be traditions that have been passed down through the years on birthdays. I know one family that on the birthday, you get breakfast in bed for your birthday. I thought, I like that idea. Sephi, on my next birthday, can you bring me breakfast in bed? Yeah, like that'll happen. Now here's another. Now this is a very touchy question, but through research it can be discovered. So ask them up front. Go, I haven't gone looking yet, but was grandpa or great grandpa, was he the only person you were married to? Were there any beaux before that you may have been engaged to, and the engagement may have been broken off for some reason? Maybe there was a war and they went away to war and never came home again. Things like that. So it is a touchy subject, so be very gentle about how you ask that. I mean, if you know, then ask. If you're unsure, approach it very carefully. This is one of my favorite questions is, how did they meet? How did your grandparents meet? How did great grandparents meet? How did they meet? What's the story of their romance? How long had they known each other before they got married? And had they always known each other? When did they meet? Were they childhood friends? Were they just happened to meet at the local dance in the town hall or something? And then what was how was the question popped to get married? How was the proposal done? And what was their wedding like? What did they wear? What food was served? And where was it held? Did they go on a trip or a honeymoon after their wedding? And if so, where to? There's just so many more questions. I've got a whole list of them. And then even asking them questions like, what was, how many children did you have? Because some of them may have had children that were stillborn or passed away in infancy. So ask them, how many children did they have? And what are their names and birth dates? So you get all of them. Where did that question go? What were their children's birth? Ask the woman, what were their children's births like? Were they at hospital? Were they at home? Were they out in the middle of the field? Were they in the barn? Were they in a carriage on the side of the road? Where were their children born? What was it like? And of course, when and where they were all born. Did you move around much? Yes, I did. What special memories do they have of their children when they were babies and toddlers? That they can share. What sort of fun stories what sort of memories can they share about their children as they were growing up, when they were babies, toddlers, preschools, that sort of thing. What was their favorite way to spend time with their children? So there's a lot of different questions that you can ask, and those are just a few. There's so many questions out there. If you would like a copy of the family history interview questions that I do have, please private message me. Do I have a... No, that's Family Tree Discover. You can go to familytreediscovered.com, and I'll go and attach this to there's a ebook that you can get that's called Family Tree Discovered, and it's at familytreediscovered.com, and I will actually attach this questionnaire to that so that you'll be able to get the ebook and this list and the list of questions of family history interviews. So those are just some of the questions. There's some fun ones in there. There's some you have to be very careful about because some of them can be very sensitive and based on the family dynamics as well. And when you're asking about if there are any adoptions in the family and stuff, just be very cautious about that one, because there may be adoptions in the family that they don't want to talk about. I do know in my own family there is a secret, and my mum, it's my maternal grandfather and his sister. there's a family secret about one of their uncles. And there's a lot of speculation on my grandfather's side on my grandfather's portion of the family. His sister knew the full story. His sister knew the story, but for some reason, my grandfather and his siblings were not allowed to know, his children were not allowed to know it. And I happened to get in contact with somebody on my great aunt's side of the family, on the side that knows the story. And they gave me some information, and I said, well, hang on, that doesn't quite line up, because this and this date just don't work. And I never heard from the person again, because they knew which side of the family I was from, but for some reason this side of the family is not allowed to know. So yes, it's very interesting. So there's a lot of speculation about one of my great uncles and who his parents were. Trying to figure out if it's my great-grandmother, my great-grandmother's parents, my great-grandmother was his mother, or if one of her daughters was his mother. One side of the family knows, one side doesn't. Interesting. But anyway, there's lots of things that you will uncover. So as you're asking questions, be prepared that there may be some secrets that come out. Be prepared that they may refuse to answer, that people may refuse to answer questions because it contains a secret that people don't want to know or don't want getting out. Even though it happened, like 100 years ago or whatever, it's still a secret. I know, I'm sort of like, it happened 100 years ago. What difference is it going to make today? But you never know. You honestly never know. So those are just some questions that we've gone over today. But come up, there may be some that you come up with your own. There may be some questions that you have that you want answers to, where you know that there is a story there, but you want to find out, is it real? Is it not real? And that's what we like to uncover those. I love uncovering those stories. And I've uncovered a few of those stories where just as I've made the discovery, the clients come back and says, oh, we already know about the story, and they tell me their story. And I'm like sitting there, do I tell them that they've been told the wrong story or not? And that becomes a bit of a dilemma on my part. But I do have to warn the clients whenever I start working with them that I may find things that may rock the boat and change beliefs on things. How do they want me to handle? Do they want to know about those things that rock the boat? Or do they want to be kept in the dark on those things? So, yeah, that's a very, very dicey area. But be upfront with people and just say, hey, look, I've heard this rumor in the family, and just want to know, if you can't talk about it, that's fine. If you can talk about it, that would be great. If you don't want me to share it with any of the family, I have no problem doing that. So, just ask the question, just put it up front. But remember that when asking people family interview questions and you're asking about their childhood and things may come up that you may not be prepared for. So be ready for the unexpected. The unexpected always leads to different places and things. And I love the unexpected. Do they get me upset? Not really, because it's history. It's part of history, and there's nothing I can do to change it. If, like I found out about some abuse in the family a few generations ago. Yes, I was sorry that relative had to go through that, but there's nothing I can do to change it. It's part of our family history. It's part of who we are. So there's nothing that I can do to change that. I just have to learn to accept it and move on. It's already happened. We can't go back in time and change it. So yeah, some areas are very touchy in some cases. So just be very cautious when you're, just that word of warning, just be very cautious about that. But anyway, that's it from us for today. Thank you everybody for tuning in and watching. Greatly appreciated you just sitting here with me for the last few minutes, 28 minutes, and not 29 now. We just switched over to 29. So thank you all for joining in and catching our podcast for today. And that's it from us for today. We will be back same place, same channel, 6 p.m. Pacific tomorrow night. So we'll catch you then. Have a super fantastic sparkling evening. Hei konera.